Hi, my name is Jake with Shift. We wanted to make a short video about a pretty simple concept, but one that's important to the way that we do work at Shift. And that concept is altitude. So the textbook definition of altitude is essentially your height above sea level. But the way that we apply it in our business context is a little bit more about your vantage point or the lens through which you look at problems. So the higher your altitude, the more you'll see, so to speak, but with less detail. So if you think about it from the lowest altitude point, the ground level, you can't see quite as much of the landscape as if you were at the top of that mountain in some respect. But you do see quite a bit in different terms, in something that's more ground level. You see the weeds, so to speak. As you move up in altitude, you see less of those details, but you see more of the overall landscape until you reach the highest of altitudes where you can see the so-called big picture, but you're not as in touch with the finer details. So for us at Shift, we ideally are starting at a fairly high altitude and driving downward so that we can create a vision that is consistent throughout the experience, that gives people at the lower altitudes more empowerment to deliver against that vision, while also using the contextual knowledge of those details that they can see at those lower altitudes to create a solution that really fits the need. And it's a two-way street, the pushing upward of lower altitude information and driving downward vision from a higher altitude, that creates an overall cohesive ecosystem of human experience. I do want to talk about a few common pitfalls that we see regarding altitude. And one is a bias towards solutioning before you really understand the problem or opportunity space. This often happens when a leader says something to the effect of, we should do XYZ because this competitor has it, and we don't, without stopping to ask why, what the value is that it will bring, where does it fit in this overall ecosystem that we're creating as a business. And the result is often a myopic kind of single solution mindset that lands off target and isn't successful at the end of the day. Another pitfall, and one related to the previous point, is when business leaders start at an altitude that's too low. So you've heard the idiom, can't see the forest from the trees. That's effectively to say you're at such a low altitude, you're losing the big picture. So we often encounter, as we're facilitating clients through this process, a real struggle to stay in high altitude thinking for even just a moment, because it can be really challenging to stay outside of that solutioning mindset. And if that persists, then assumptions are ultimately made as to the goals and visions of what various leaders are looking for. And the result is misaligned vision and goals that can ultimately cause struggles downstream and conflict upstream at the end of the day. And then finally, on the flip side of the coin for altitude thinking, is if we encounter a leadership team that is fairly high altitude thinking, but isn't good at the activation of that thinking. So you'll see that in that case, lots of spinning in the clouds. And you'll often hear phrases like, oh, that's really good, important discussion. Let's set up another meeting to follow through with that. And you leave meetings without any kind of resolution many times. So you feel like you're creating good discussion, important topics are coming up, but there's no direction as to how to turn that into activation. No clear directive afterwards. So you just have this meeting mayhem of circular thinking, great conversation that goes nowhere, essentially. And that's pretty common, and it's why part of our job at Shift is to drive activation mindsets from the very highest of altitudes all the way down to the lowest of altitudes. So activation is going to mean different things at different altitudes. At a high altitude, you're not going to be very specific about what the outcome should be. You're going to leave that to teams at lower altitudes to determine based on the more contextual knowledge that they have. But you give more of a strategic approach at higher altitude, frame up potential hypotheses for solutions, and then allow deeper teams to explore those hypotheses, maybe reject some, maybe create new ones, get approval for those, and move forward. Um, so that's our take on altitude. Feel free to reach out to us or book a call from our website, shiftstl.com. If you have any struggles with your teams right now, considering the right altitude for the moment, if you're finding yourself spinning in any situations, or if you're running too fast to solutions, let us know and we can have a talk. Hopefully this has been useful. We do plan to have more of these short videos in the future, so look forward to those, and we'll see you later.